Welcome, Climate Viewers. My name is Jim Lee from ClimateViewer News at ClimateViewer.com. And the headline of the day, Geoengineering may cause World War III. This is now showed up in two separate mainstream media articles. So it's starting to get a little bit creepy. We're going to go through what this means. Is it a false flag? Why in the world would geoengineering cause World War III? I'd first like to remind everybody, if you're new here, if this is the first time you've seen one of my videos, please hit that subscribe button, or there's the link on the screen for you so you can subscribe to the channel. And everything I do is open source, free of charge, and you can put this on your website, you can email it, do whatever you want with it. It's free, and I'm supported by my patrons at patreon.com/climateviewer, or if you want to give a one-time donation on PayPal or GoFundMe, that's greatly appreciated. But what we're going to talk about today is a very serious topic, and I've already put the article up on climateviewer.com, and it's got all the references we're going to go through, and you can see them here, quite a bit to go through, and I'm going to go through it rapidly, and then we're going to show an interview I did with Quite Frankly. If you guys aren't familiar with Quite Frankly, you're really going to like him, and I hope that you guys will enjoy this video. It's very informative. So right off the bat, what are the articles? Stormy outlook. Plans to hack Earth's weather could start World War III. Panic scientists warn. That's in The Sun. Kind of more of a tabloid. Shouldn't be that big a deal, but that's not the first time this has been mentioned. Also, we have long-shot presidential candidate Andrew Yang thinks rogue geoengineering could cause a war. He wants the U.S. to take the lead before it happens. So what we have is signaling. They always broadcast in advance, what their purpose is, oh my God, this is going to be bad. Yeah, Jack. Jack saw the Quite Frankly show. I'm going to show that in its entirety at the end of this video, because I think it was excellent as well. So if you guys want to check this out, this is not something you're going to be able to just get over it. Okay. This is going to be in our face and could very well lead to dead people. Oh, by the way, geoengineering will lead to dead people anyway. So either way you have it, whether it's geoengineering or World War III, this could be a very bad situation. Now, for those who don't know about the interviews pages, right here on the links on the menu on climateviewer.com, I've done a couple of interviews lately. I was on Parabnormal Radio with Jeremy Scott, and when we did about an hour and a half on 5G exposure and electromagnetic frequencies. You guys can see that here. Go check it out. Links are already on the interviews page, and that's on Spreaker. You can listen to it there, or you can see it on his YouTube channel. Just uploaded Jim Lee 5G exposure and electromagnetic frequencies. I was also on Truth Frequency Radio with Rob Skiba from Revolutionary Radio, and we did Climate Change or Climate Changers, and that was a great interview. I hope you guys will check that out as well. So and then finally, I got permission, a permission request via email from a rather large YouTube channel called Universe Inside You, with over 1 million subscribers, and he wanted to use a lot of our material from weathermodificationhistory.com. Watch this before they delete it. They can control the weather. I hope you guys will check that video out as well. So in that, we talk about, it talks about the 10 technologies that own the weather today, and goes through, the entire history of weather modification. So I hope you guys will check that video out. Pretty epic video, very well edited. Lots in that. Damn it, I clicked the stupid link underneath it. And you can see that he used a lot of our newspaper articles that were created by Dominic Marama. Very informative video. And in it, he links to weathermodificationhistory.com, geoengineeringwatch.org, and climateviewer.com. So big thanks to Universe Inside You for getting the word out to a lot of people. Video's only been up a couple days, already has 71,000 views. Mentioning geoengineeringwatch.org, I want to make this clear for the record. For those, before we get any further into this video, I have deleted everything I've said about Dane Wigington. Namaste, brother man. Same side, whatever. No more focusing on the negative, only focusing on the positive. So I hope that you guys will support me in the deletion of any of the content that I've made in the past criticizing him, because, I don't know it all. And I've said from the get-go, even when I was criticizing him, I encourage you to watch everything that Dane puts out on geoengineeringwatch.org and watch his videos. I only ask that you do the same for me. So, and thank you to Zachary in chat. Appreciate you, brother. All right, so let's get to this thing. All right, so we've done these interviews. You can check all of these interviews out, including the one with Rob Skiba. They are all on the interview page right here. And the Geoengineering World War III and Nervous Barrio, and that's Barry Obama, on Quite Frankly podcast. I love Quite Frankly. Pretty epic fellow. We met quite a while ago, and he actually asked me to help him build his new server for broadcasting online, which I gave him all the specs for. He had it built locally, and then I even went and secured. This is his webpage for those who've never been there before. It's just an excellent show. So I highly suggest that you guys tune into him. And if you go to my YouTube channel, which you can do right here at the top of the page, you'll see that I have him already linked up on the sidebar over here. Quite frankly, so just go to my YouTube channel and you'll see a link to his page. Give him a subscribe. Tell him I sent you. 18,420 subscribers. Oh my goodness! Everybody light it up for this show because it's about to get crazy. All right, so let's just. I want you guys to see this interview. I think it went really well. And we're going to play it so that you guys can get the lowdown on the geoengineering and World War III.
Alone in its reporting on this. Stormy outlook. Plans to hack Earth's weather could start World War III. Panicked scientists warn. Climate change may end up causing World War III if individual countries start to try and save themselves by hacking the weather with a process called geoengineering. Okay, it's a process called geoengineering. You might not have heard about it because we've been suppressing it up until now. Many experts are in favor of geoengineering, which involves manipulating the atmosphere by blocking sunlight or isolating excess carbon. But weather hacking in one region could have negative impacts in another and lead to global conflict, according to scientists. That's very funny. Very interesting. In fact, I would imagine that the reason why it's so rainy on the East Coast these days is because of how much California is trying to meddle with their own ecosystem out there, drying it out, burning it to shit, or it gets burned to shit every year now, it seems. And we barely get sun over here now. It's solar engineering that appears to be most problematic, and not so much carbon capture, because solar geoengineering would involve spraying chemicals into the air that would block some sunlight. Okay, we know all about that. Don't call them chemtrails, though. They have been renamed. And we also have John Brennan, still acting director of the CIA at that point, making a very impassioned speech about how this is his favorite thing. So, When speaking on sun-blocking topics, geoengineering researcher Juan Moreno Cruz told Business Insider the threat of war is never out of the question. If geoengineering is going to happen, then all countries would have to be informed and agree, because some areas may be more negatively affected than others. Well, I mean, there's flat-out weather warfare being conducted since the 1960s. Our next guest is going to be able, or would be able to, we have a I don't know if it comes up naturally, but Jim Lee has brought up on a number of occasions how the weather has been used and manipulated to not only flood the hell out of certain enemies, but also deprive other enemies of rain so that their crops would fail, like in communist Cuba. Very interesting stuff here. But of course, people, if you are only on the morphine drip of information that the mainstream gives you, and I know that the Sun from the UK is not the most widely accepted purveyor of truth, but still, the morphine drip is going to leave you wondering, you know, what the hell's going on. Now, before I bring him on, because we got a couple of minutes here, there's a lot of things going through my head, and perhaps it's just the line of work that I'm in now that's turning me into a little bit more of a paranoid person, but maybe not. But we have reports of devastating floods, these tornadoes, even the hurricanes that magically returned to the United States coastline once Donald Trump was elected. Obama seemingly didn't have to deal with anything in his second term, at least. And then all of a sudden there comes Donald Trump, and there goes Jennifer Lawrence talking about how it's because we backed out of the Paris Climate Accords that Gaia is very, very upset with us, and we started getting hit. In comes Harvey, in comes that one, here comes Michael. And at the same time, months worth, over the last 6 to 8 months at least, months worth of domestic and international power outages, internet service disruptions, satellite disruptions, social media platform failures, even when the internet is fine and strong and dandy for everybody else. Some of those failures on social media and elsewhere have been theorized periodically to be the testing of a long-fabled internet kill switch, in case there is a real need to make sure that the way that people consume, share, and decipher news has to have a little bit of a stick thrown into the spokes of it all. Now, why would the kill switches be readied right now if that were the case? That's a question I would want to be answering if I could. Perhaps it has something to do with the nonstop warnings that a tidal wave of fake and politically damaging media could be coming out soon to reap havoc, not only on the 2020 election, but for the greater world order thereafter. I don't know. And also, not to mention, a few days ago, the New York Times publicized that the United States is actively hacking or trying to hack the Russian power grid. Now, that's a story in itself that can cause a conflict, whether it's true or not. But now the weather hacking itself could lead to World War III. And on the other side of the break, Jim Lee, the climate viewer himself, will be on with us for a very special segment to see if there is something here that we are missing, something that he has caught, and then perhaps what we can do about it, if anything. Because it seems like the only thing we can ever really do about it is arm ourselves with the information to give ourselves a fighting chance on an individual level. At this point, when you're talking about the power of the individual against these technocratic corporate giants, you just got to take it as it comes. How you doing?
Good. Want to fight about it?
Yes, I do. Tonight I'm looking for a fight. I got to be honest.
Well, let's do it, man.
Well, you know what? I want to cut right to the chase because I'm sure that you've been watching. You usually watch the segments prior, but the kinds of simultaneous things that are going on right now that we're being bombarded with. Am I paranoid for feeling like we're being set up?
I don't think so.
Okay, so then where would you start on all this stuff? Of course, the big topic right now is the Sun and other outlets talking about how weather manipulation can actually be a trigger to World War III now.
Yeah, so there's been a long debate. Yeah, I started researching geoengineering in 2012. in detail. And even in the scientific community 6 years ago, there were really big questions to be answered, like who gets to control the thermostat? That being the biggest one. And for those who aren't familiar with geoengineering, the idea is that, you've heard it all from AOC to, all of the climatards, that we're all going to die in 12 years if we don't change course. So global warming is so dire that we have to take drastic measures. And they had this thing called the Paris Accord, which was what Donald Trump pulled out of, or COP21, COP21. They made an agreement to limit greenhouse gas emissions to 1.5 degrees Celsius of heating of the planet. And because, of the way it was worded, a lot of academics said that, it had deadly flaws in the agreement, kind of like the Iran nuclear agreement, that it was too lofty a goal. It was unrealistic to begin with, so it was doomed to fail. Which begs the question, if it was doomed to fail, what was their backup plan, or what was their actual plan all along? And their plan has been geoengineering. And geoengineering, or stratospheric aerosol injection, or solar radiation management, is the idea that we would mimic volcanoes by spraying chemicals in the sky, in the stratosphere, aluminum, calcium, sulfur, various different diamond dust, believe it or not, to create a sunscreen in the sky. And that would last anywhere from 2 to 10 years at a time, when they deployed it, and that would cool the planet down. So that would be like a band-aid until we got off of fossil fuels. But this idea is so dangerous. Even the top scientists like Ken Caldera and David Keith. David Keith is on record. There's a video on climateviewer.com/geoengineering, where you can see David Keith admit it can kill tens of thousands of people if they do geoengineering. So if the COP21, if the Paris Accord was doomed to fail, and geoengineering is the only backup option, well, who gets to decide when, where, and how much? So that's where the real argument comes in. And of course, just recently, they tried to take this to the United Nations and say, hey, well, then the UN should, be the arbiter of who gets to geoengineer, follow all the geoengineering research. And the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil blocked that. And then oddly enough said that they would defer to the next upcoming IPCC, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, report to determine whether this was going to be, maybe they should regulate it. I mean, this makes no sense at all. So there's a lot of posturing going on, but at the end of the day, the problem I see is that because the Paris Accord was doomed to fail, because John Podesta has a super PAC that before, during, and after the Paris Agreement was pushing geoengineering. And they literally said, and this is in the DC Leaks emails from John Podesta, we don't want to admit that geoengineering is an option until after the Paris Accord is signed. So I personally believe that the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil blocked the UN from doing this because part of the agreement would be that there would be a full disclosure of all geoengineering research and experiments ongoing. So you put that with another article on ClimateViewer.com, the Cia and Climate Terrorism, and basically one of the geoengineers, Alan Robot, got a call from the CIA, and they asked him, if another country was doing weather manipulation or geoengineering over our country, would we know it? And he said, at the same time, I was thinking to myself, if we were doing geoengineering over another country, would they know it? And the answer is no. So that's why this is such a scary topic and such a scary, tipping point, because if somebody were geoengineering, you couldn't really prove it. And so it's kind of like the yellow cake, you know what I mean? Um, in Iraq, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. At any moment, the United States or China or Russia could say any one of the three was geoengineering, and that could lead to nuclear war. Um, Nuclear war being the least of our worries, considering all the microwave and hypersonic weapons we have today. It would be the worst. It would make the first two world wars look, kind of pale in comparison. It'd be like comparing Antietam to a schoolyard fight.
But as far as false flag, being able to use it as a false flag, that's definitely a new way of blaming somebody for something. But as far as the blocking there goes, that kind of disclosure would open up past experimentation that is on the books that would be then verifiable, where people would say, all right, well, now that all this stuff has been made public, they can say the rest of the world would see just where and when the U.S. and other countries would have been making these experiments over foreign lands then. And they
Exactly.
want okay. And there's no way to wipe those clean. Like if you say, oh, these are going to be made public, just destroy them. Why wouldn't they destroy that evidence?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we already know that there's geoengineering going on. I mean, Chuck Long from NOAA, he said that aircraft emissions are causing accidental geoengineering, where they're creating an ice haze that's whitening the sky. So airplanes are already geoengineering. MIT University, we're about to stop a massive accidental experiment in cooling the planet. They were referring to ship tracks. So jet aircraft and international shipping are already geoengineering the planet.
And that's why the sky is getting. Everybody keeps saying that the sky isn't as blue as it used to be.
Exactly.
That's what is turning it a lighter and lighter hue.
Yeah, it's the buildup of aerosols in the atmosphere, and that's exactly what geoengineering, seeks to do. So, can you see my screen share here?
Yes.
Long shot presidential candidate Andrew Yang thinks rogue geoengineering could cause war. He wants the U.S. to take the lead before it happens. Rogue geoengineering is the term for this sort of thing. And that's what the CIA was talking about in this article here, the CIA, Weather Warfare, and Climate Terrorism. And that's where Alan Robach right here said, I got a phone call from the men at the CIA. The CIA, they had, they've got a long history of weather warfare. The CIA, Henry Kissinger, were the lead operators in Operation Popeye or Operation Motorpool, the weather warfare over Vietnam back in the late 60s, early 70s. They also were doing cloud seeding over the Gulf of Mexico to ensure that rain did not fall on Cuba. This was called Project Nile Blue. So to deny rainfall in Vietnam, the slogan was "Make mud, not war." So they were using 5 planes. Henry Kissinger, the CIA, a couple people from the Air Force and Navy knew about it. In total, about 19 people on the bases in Vietnam, and not even the Secretary of Defense knew about it. With Project Nile Blue, even less is known about it. They were trying to kill Castro's sugar crops by denying them rain. Today, we have Brigadier General from Iran saying that Israel and other countries are stealing their rain and clouds. So weather warfare, has been going on since the 60s and 70s. It hasn't stopped. Even though there's an international ban that was passed in 1978 to stop somebody from doing this, it's just an agreement. There's no way to catch somebody in the act. That's why I proposed a solution, the Environmental Modification Accountability Act, which is an add-on to the weather warfare ban of 1978 that would, create verification and transparency. But right now we don't have that. That's why the term rogue geoengineering means if someone were to go rogue, if some entity or country were to just go it alone, then that would be a problem. And there actually has been a case where somebody was called a rogue geoengineer. His name was Russ George. And he did the Cia restoration project where he went and dumped a bunch of rust, iron oxide, into the ocean to create a massive phytoplankton bloom. The idea behind it was we're going to create plankton in the ocean. This is going to bring back the salmon that the international fishers have been stealing from our island. But at the same time, that's a geoengineering technique known as ocean iron fertilization, because phytoplankton sequester or suck up CO2. So there were articles all around the world about the rogue geoengineer, Russ George. I tweeted him a couple times. He tweeted me back, and I was like, of all the geoengineering ideas, this is the least harmful one I've heard of, because phytoplankton also make air for us to breathe. But, most of the air we breathe comes from the ocean. But at least I don't have to breathe some poison that was sprayed over my head. And it's not going to change the weather to the extremes,
Well,
the reason.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, and I was gonna dovetail on that and just go right into the international implications of war at this point here too, where obviously I can see how any sovereign nation would become very concerned and upset and maybe even publicly outraged that another sovereign nation would be screwing with the skies over their citizens, even though most countries are screwing with their own skies, or doing something that would have adverse effects many thousands of miles away, whatever the hell it may be. Where do you think out of this, unless you think that it would where do you think out of this would World War III, when they go as far as saying that we see this could be a global outbreak of war, where do you think the outrage for something like that would be? I mean, I can imagine saying, hey, this is unbelievable, this is a dastardly thing, and maybe there being a push for global accountability. Maybe an idea like yours would actually get some traction there on a global scale, so that one country's experimenting doesn't become another country's problem. But is there an aspect we're missing here where this would actually turn to a hot war?
No, that's exactly the point. That's what I'm trying to avoid here is, we need transparency, because at the end of the day, this could get ugly real quick. And if we don't have transparency, then we end up in a situation where, anybody could say, hey, they're screwing with our weather, and then suddenly, it's an all-out war. This could go really bad really quickly. And the problem is,
so I guess what you're saying is in situations like in Cuba in the 60s, or how Iran is talking about Israel taking away their rain, whereas that would only be speculative. If we had some kind of disclosure, then it would actually be a confirmed act of war.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's exactly the point. Because the idea behind geoengineering that's most scary is that it will change rainfall patterns worldwide. So if you were to mimic a volcano, basically the northern hemisphere would get wetter and the southern hemisphere would get drier. So part of the big geoengineering debate has been how to pay the losers or the dead people. Whenever we have large volcanoes erupt, the Amazon basin basically dries up. So if we were to do geoengineering on a massive scale, make it legal, and all the countries agree to do it, that's exactly what would happen. Brown people in the southern hemisphere would be dead, and the northern hemisphere would be perfectly fine. So, and soaking wet to boot, let's say.
Yeah. Hello.
My daughter wants to be on air, apparently, my 2-year-old.
Everybody does.
Who doesn't, especially on your show? Um, but yeah, it's a serious problem because there is no transparency, and that's why at weathermodificationhistory.com, I've spent so much time trying to break down that history, so that people realize those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. That's what I like to say, and that's the main problem I see is that most people don't know this history. There's even a group right now trying to permanently ban geoengineering, and it's called the ETC group, or Emerging Technologies Cooperative, something like that, coalition. ETC group. They wrote something called "Hands Off Mother Earth Manifesto: A Permanent Ban on Geoengineering." So they took that to the UN as well, and they're trying to get that passed so that we can avoid this altogether. But the problem is nothing is to stop. Nothing. There's no possibility of stopping China from geoengineering. They could decide at any moment that they're going to, and that's it. We'll just have to deal with it. So we're going to have to really watch carefully, what's going on around the world, because really there's no transparency. And right now China is basically covering the entire Tibetan plateau in thousands of cloud seeding generators. And the ETC group said literally that these could be converted to geoengineering at any moment. So from weather modifications straight to, hey, we're gonna just turn this into a geoengineering project instead of a make and rain project, and nobody would be the wiser. So that's the scary thing about it. All of these technologies are in place. There is no transparency. There's no way to verify if somebody's screwing with the weather. They'll just say, "Oh, well, the weather's bad because of climate change." It wasn't me, stupid.
Now,
So, and then suddenly we're right there in the middle of a war.
this is that. Well, I'm glad that I was able to bring you on to talk about that because it makes perfect sense now. And since we have about 11 minutes left in this segment, I think it's perfect time to bring something else up. This was brought up in the Guardian. It was published in the Guardian yesterday on Tuesday, and the headline is "Scientists Shocked." Scientists shocked by Arctic permafrost thawing 70 years sooner than predicted. Let me get this up on screen for people to see. And Jim, what they're saying, I'm sure you must have seen this, says the couple of the key points here. Ice blocks frozen solid for thousands of years have been destabilized, and here's a quote: "The climate is now warmer than any time in the last 5,000 years." And they're talking about permafrost at outposts in Canadian Arctic has now been thawing 70 years earlier than predicted, and going on and on about that. Now, what do you say when you read stuff like this, and of course all of the breathless reporting about how the Earth is getting warmer, or some people are saying it's getting cooler, and others just try to commit to saying climate change, then I have to get into the semantics. But what do you, when you get, and actually, I don't know if you actually have this link, so let me put this in the chat right here so you can take a look at it, so we're all looking at the same thing. But where do you go with something like this when it pops up?
I don't think they're shocked at all, and I'll show you why. Um, Here, let me do a screen share real quick, and I'll show you exactly why. So let me go here, and here we go. So, all right, you can see my screen, right?
Yep, that's the
All
article.
right, so that's the article. Now, what if I told you that as early as this is 1921, 1889, Jules Verne, the purchase of the North Pole. Although they were searching for coal and not oil, readers will find the auction of the Arctic energy reserves has a definite 21st century ring. The idea was that they were going to use a huge cannon to tilt the axis of the planet to melt the poles. In 1921, Carol Livingston Riker said to move Earth and melt the poles. A $190 million Newfoundland jetty would cause the axis to shift. End of iceberg menace. They wanted to send the Gulf Stream unchilled into Arctic's heart, abolishing fogs and extreme cold. 1929, Herman Oberth said, let's make giant mirrors on the space station to focus the sun's radiation on Earth's surface to melt the poles. In 1945, Julian Huxley, biologist and Secretary General of UNESCO, said, let's explode atomic bombs at an appropriate height above polar regions to raise the temperature of the Arctic Ocean and melt the poles. Guess what? They did that. I have them mapped out on climateviewer.org. 2,615 nuclear explosions, many
Jeez.
of which in the Arctic. So then in 1958, M. Gorodsky and Valentin Cherenkov said, let's place a ring of metallic potassium particles into Earth's polar orbit to diffuse light from reaching the Earth and permanently thaw the frozen soil of Russia, Canada, and Alaska and melt polar ice. They went on to do Project Westford, which they dumped 480 million dipole antennas, the Westford needles, into orbit. That's what they look like. So for 100 years now, they've been talking about melting the poles. Why? Because they want to get to the oil and gas. So in 1966, Committee on Atmospheric Science had a report called Weather and Climate Modification Problems and Prospects, and they said supersonic transports could double the concentration of water vapor, and a 5-fold increase in stratospheric water vapor would raise the temperature of Earth's surface by 1.6 degrees Celsius.
Oh, 1.6.
Oh, isn't that a unique number? So the language
and with the Paris Climate Accord, is it 1.5 degrees Celsius?
Oh, it is. So that's actually what they say, but if you read the actual language, it says to limit the heating to 2 degrees Celsius maximum. So anywhere between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius would be okay. Why? Because for 100 freaking years they've been saying, let's melt the poles and get to the ice. Here's where it gets really interesting. Greenland ice sheet melts more when it's cloudy. Clouds enhance Greenland ice sheet meltwater runoff. Nature Communications. Climate News Network. Cloud blanket warms up melting ice cap. This is 2016. So these are all talking about planes making cirrus clouds and how they're melting the poles. This is not a surprise to anybody, okay? And the other thing is, have you heard of the new Cold War?
I have not.
Because this is also on The Guardian.
I guess they're very busy bees over there, aren't they?
Yeah, and the new Cold War over drilling in the Arctic. That is exactly what's going on. So while they're so busy talking about saving the poles, saving the Arctic ice, they know that, basically clouds are melting the poles, that geoengineering is occurring. Oh, but wait, the geoengineering that's happening, the aerosols coming out of planes and making clouds are melting the freaking Arctic. And that's the whole goal. It's been the goal for 100 years. So what has changed? IPCC Paris Accord, they all say limit heating to 2 degrees Celsius maximum, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius. In 1966, they said that aircraft, just putting water vapor in the sky, would heat the planet by 1.5 degrees Celsius. But they focus on CO2 because it's, it's BS. It's a straw man. Look over here. It's your car. It's you burning wood. It's your fault. Meanwhile, they're experimenting in the skies. They have been for well over 100 years. That's why I documented it, weather modification history, to try to raise the alarm with facts and history, because those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. And in this case, if we repeat the failures of the past, like we did with Vietnam with weather warfare, like we did with Cuba with weather warfare, like what's going on today in Iran, with them claiming that people are stealing their clouds and their rain, and it hitting 150 plus degrees Fahrenheit in Iran. Um, this is real, warfare in the sky. And it could lead to a hot war, and I'm not talking about the 150 degrees. I'm talking about water resources are the second most important resource on the planet, next to human resources, obviously, to these people, these technocrats that run the world. And, if you start screwing with the sky, you could devastate countries.
Oh, and not only that, but whereas a drone can be downed behind enemy lines somewhere, and all identification can lead back to an enemy nation or whatever the hell it is. To send in a cloud or to send in, very extreme weather, that's not going to have the markings of the United States or Israel or Brazil or anything like that. So with having this unaccountability, you have a lot of plausible deniability as far as your involvement in everybody else's demise. And when you bring up everything going on in the Arctic, it really seems that there is such a huge, and now I understand a little bit better what full spectrum dominance actually means, because to create and to manage that kind of the idea of scarcity of resources while you're grabbing it all up and you're creating this idea of scarcity and you're regulating the hell out of Western and free countries and trying to manipulate human behavior to do what they want, move people into these population centers, we know what's going on socially and biologically and all that other stuff. But man, oh man, and at the same time, while you're working on all of those goals with oil and all the other resources you say that we need to get away from, and you're telling everybody else that they have to live with less, they also kept the card up their sleeve to play with climate change, even though they're the ones that are probably behind the helm of every crazy weather event that's going on the planet.
Exactly. And, this is about resource management. And, they'll claim that they're, about saving the Arctic, preventing all of this stuff. But you got to understand that just like in the government, there's a deep state in the climate world. And this deep state, their goal is to replace the natural water cycle, to control every aspect of it, to say you get water, you don't. Oh, by the way, we're going to still, if anybody Googles the new Cold War, it's going to blow your mind, because it flies right in the face of everything that we're told about climate change and saving the Arctic. We've already fracked the entire north slope of Alaska. We have for a long time. So there's a group called the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, and they, are behind this whole dinosaur farts melted methane and killed, all the dinosaurs. So if we don't go and frack the Arctic to remove the methane from under the permafrost, then it could rapidly vent into the sky and cause runaway global warming. This is called the Clathrate gun hypothesis. So while they're busy saying, well, CO2 is melting methane, and that's going to kill us all if the methane reaches the atmosphere. Oh, wait, let's come up with the ANGELS proposal, or the Arctic Natural Gas Extraction, Liquefaction, and Sales. And the idea is to go ahead and remove that abscess before it explodes, So let's go frack the Arctic to save us from global warming. So all of these things are going on simultaneously. You've got weather warfare, you've got geoengineering scientists who are talking about controlling the global thermostat, you've got planes making clouds that are trapping heat like a blanket, the Venus effect, that hold heat in at night and keep it warmer. So, 3 separate scientific papers I showed you that say the Greenland ice sheet melts more when it's cloudy. Who's making the clouds? The planes are making the clouds. Ships are making the clouds. So all of this going on simultaneously, no transparency whatsoever. And this now we're hearing the alarm bell being rung that this could lead to nuclear war. This could lead to World War III. So I think that everybody should take this very seriously, because they always broadcast what their intentions are, and this is as clear a broadcast, throwing it out there. DEFCON 5 is on the horizon. Oh, you thought that the new Green Deal was scary, and 12 years we're all going to die is scary. Now it's nuclear war and World War III if geoengineering happens by China, Russia, America without permission from the New World Order, one world government. We have to have transparency. I mean, we've got to get these people under control, because literally any institution, Council on Foreign Relations, CIA, a freaking college, could get the money together. Bill Gates could get the money together and decide to buy 100 planes and geoengineer the planet. That's David Keith, when he did his cost estimates for geoengineering, it ranged from 4 planes to 100 planes.
That's not a lot at all.
No, and we're talking 100 to 150,000 flights a day are going on that are already geoengineering the sky. And there's another one you might want to look up, biofuels for contrail control. They're trying to use biofuels to make these clouds cool the planet instead of heat the planet. So I think there's a tug of war going on.
There definitely is, and I appreciate everything tonight, Jim. It's been a fantastic time with you. I love these short segments because I think that it's a lot easier for people who are being exposed to this for the first time to maybe absorb some of it. It's so great, and we're so starved for information, and you really make up a lot for that deficit. Thank you for everything tonight, everybody. Jim Lee, ClimateViewer.com, ClimateViewer.org, WeatherModificationHistory.com. Anything else, Jim, you want to say to people real quick?
Just remember that, with information comes power, and with power comes great responsibility. So even though may seem like a scary topic, use this information to attack ideas, not people. We don't want World War III.
That's it. No,
I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Oh, always time, brother, man. Thank you so much for the time. I'll talk to you afterwards.
Definitely.
All right, be well.
Have a great.
Oh, shit! I always. No. Hold on. I have to call him back.
At this point, everybody's giving him hell in chat.
That was all.
This is hilarious.
I usually cut people off in the middle of bye. Jim.
Yeah.
I cut you off in the middle of have a great something. I have to make this up. So say your sign off again. Tell me good night again.
You have a wonderful night, bro.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, later.
Shit. Oh, man. I cut him off in the middle of later. It's just there's a delay. There's something wrong. It's not me, of course. It's not my fault. I don't have any problems.
Oh, they gave him hell. It was hilarious.
So, all right, everybody. We're going to be right back. Thank you so much, Jim Lee, for that one. 914-595-6953 is the number over here. When we get back, I have to talk about something real quick. Mr. Barry O.
Oh, God. So that was hilarious. So you guys, I hope y'all enjoyed that. Pretty epic conversation. I really enjoyed being able to talk with everybody in chat today. This was kind of fun to do. And let me go over here real quick and remind everybody that everything we talked about in the interview, plus some other stuff, is available already on ClimateViewer.com. Link is in the details. And, we covered all this stuff. This is the actual interview, so it's right at the top. It's also on my interviews page. And then the two articles, Stormy Outlook, Plans to Hack Earth's Weather Could Start World War III, Panic Scientists Warn. The Andrew Yang one, Rogue Geoengineering Could Cause a War. If you did not see it, UN Geoengineering Governance Blocked by U.S. and Saudi Arabia. This really explains the background behind, what the hell's going on here. And the CIA, Weather Warfare and Climate Terrorism, where Professor Alan Robach, a geoengineer, got a phone call from the CIA. It said, we'd like to know if some other country was controlling our climate. Would we know about it? At the same time, I thought they were probably also interested in if we could control somebody else's climate, could they detect it? The CIA is a major funder of the National Academies of Science report, so that makes me really worried who is going to be in control. You can watch that there. And then, of course, everybody knows the video about Secretary Brennan at the Council on Foreign Relations talking about geoengineering. And you can watch that here. Why? Why has it gained his attention? Because the CIA has a long history of tampering with the weather. And you can read that in the article, Henry Kissinger, the CIA and Weather Warfare. Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. The CIA has been in control of the weather for quite some time. And it is no surprise to me at all that the CIA is interested in geoengineering. And if at all there is any truth to the chemtrail conspiracy that planes are geoengineering the planet on purpose, that would be the reason why. Is because basically, the CIA has been at it for quite some time. Oh, y'all couldn't hear Brennan. That is very weird. Well, I apologize for that. Oh, I've got my desktop audio muted on this one. I'm a derpistan. Sorry about that. Why don't we go back and play it one more time? Roll that beautiful beam footage. Let's do it one more time.
Often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
In much the same way as the CIA likes to inject chemicals in the sky to screw with the weather. And this is an article from 1976, CIA tampered with Cuba's weather. Another one right here where the Iran thing, CIA are the weatherman. And of course, they were trying to deny rainfall to Cuba. And then finally, we've got straight out of the horse's mouth, David Keith.
This is a really important moral point. So if I made a decision, or if there was a collective decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense to put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say, you might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as a direct result of that decision. I think that has moral consequences. I don't sweep it under the rug. So this is a case where I take this much differently from Alan and think it's a much more serious issue. Now,
So this is Alan Robach right here. And Alan Robach's the one that got the phone call from the CIA. And this is David Keith, the one who's wanting to do the geoengineering program sometime this year, ScopeX. Details about that on my website. Alan Robach, who got the phone call from the CIA, also went on to say right here in his paper called Stratospheric Sulfur Geoengineering Benefits and Risks. He came up with 6 good reasons to do geoengineering and 27 reasons not to do geoengineering. And I want to blow that up for you guys so you can see it real clear. I mean, the list goes on from causing drought in Africa and Asia all the way down to military use of technology. Moral authority. Do we have the right to do this? Whose hand is on the thermostat? This is very serious stuff. I was at the Weather Modification Conference where he gave this speech. I was actually interviewing James Roger Fleming when I saw Alan Robach, and me and him, we met eyes real quickly, and I wasn't able to interview him because I was like, I'm interviewing Jim Fleming, and there's Alan Robach. Damn it! And he quickly got out the building, and I never saw him again. So anyway, Davy Keith was the one speaking in that video. All these, this stuff I'm showing is in the article that's linked in the details to this video. I previously covered this in a video, Rogue Geoengineering Could Lead to Nuclear War, about the first article. And then, this is the video that was done on the channel, The Universe Inside You. Watch this before they delete it. They can control the weather. So, guys, this has been a pretty lengthy video. The whole purpose of this was to kind of accentuate the facts, because there is a lack of fact-based YouTube channels out there, and you're certainly not going to hear this in the mainstream media. I really appreciate, quite frankly, for doing the interview. Check out all of my interviews on climateviewer.com/interviews. There are many of them going back years. So if you haven't seen it on my YouTube channel, there's much more material out there that you can check out. I hope that you guys will understand that this very well could be a false flag, because there's no way to catch somebody doing geoengineering. There's no way to catch somebody doing weather warfare, even though weather warfare was banned in 1978. That's why I push very hard for the idea behind the Environmental Modification Accountability Act. You can find that on climateviewer.com/NMOD, ENMOD. And it's an add-on to the law that's already on the books that bans weather warfare, that would make it to where we could catch even the military in the act of geoengineering or weather modification, and would require anybody worldwide to disclose before they modify the weather, in real time on the internet live. That way, if they end up creating a tornado or a flood, they can be held legally liable. So, to answer Megan's question, do I have a book written? My wife has been on my butt for about 3 to 6 months about writing a book. So, yes, I'm going to try to make the time to do something like that, because this really needs to be the entire story told that way. Max Mogram in the house. Love you, Max. Longtime friend there, man. I got to make you a moderator. One of my homies from back in the day. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap this up here. A lot of information in this video, a lot of information in the article. Check it out. It's in the details. Several hours worth of research. Just, if you were to go through and read all of the links from the articles that are written on this page. And I hope you will understand that geoengineering is potentially a weapon. It will change rainfall patterns worldwide. It will kill people. The geoengineers admit this. The politicians know this. The technocrats certainly know this. And the people who are running the world understand that water is the second most important resource next to human resources. And they want to control all resources on the planet. And the best way to do it is, war. And the other thing is to just, control the weather. And what's better than weather control in World War III? Both at the same time. So now you know, and knowing is half the battle. And with information comes power, and with power comes great responsibility. So I hope that you all will take this information. You'll share it widely. Sharing is caring. I hope that you will remember to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you got the funds available, it's always greatly appreciated if you could donate. I do everything free of charge. Learn about the 10 technologies used to control the weather today and spread the word. But whenever you use this information, just remember that to attack ideas, not people. Love you, mean it, be safe out there.
Kids are impressionable. That's why here at this station, we watch the programs and commercials your child watches carefully. He may see bad guys, but not in the role of heroes. And he'll learn that crime doesn't pay. Because your child's welfare is our concern, too. That's part of our code.
Better than anything you can get without a prescription. Anything. It's the best.